Hello, my fine friends. Welcome back to Destination Discourse. I am your host, Stuart Butler, and I'm joined today with the man with the hat and the man who has the topic that I don't know what it is today. It is Adam Stoker. How are you, sir?
Stuart, the power that I feel to be able to have the topic and to
Mm-hmm.
have you have no idea what it is, I like this feeling, Stuart.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I don't know,
it feels
man. Don't
good.
let it go to your head. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So
Yeah,
just be
outside
careful.
of this show, I don't have a lot of desire for power, but
Yeah,
here in this show, I'm
yeah.
hungry for it, you know?
Especially when it's just the two of us, right? And you're not trying to take power over our guests. I'm assuming it's really
No,
just
no, it's you.
you want power over me.
It's just you.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna quote the labyrinth, and I'm gonna be treat you like the elf king, and then I'm gonna realize that you have no power over me. So therefore, I'm free. I'm free from your power. So anyone born in the 70s or 80s will get that deep cut from the labyrinth, but no
You
one
know,
else.
my wife, when we got married, was
Hmm.
shocked that I had never seen the movie The Labyrinth, and I still haven't.
What? You
Yeah,
still have never seen the labyrinth?
still never seen it.
David Bowie at his greatest. No, maybe not, but certainly Jennifer Connelly at her greatest. It's amazing movie. You're depriving your children of that. Like your kids should watch that movie. It's a
Yeah.
fantastical, magical movie, and it has some deep layers, man, about who
See, the
controls you. And
power has already shifted, and I'm a bad dad now in this conversation. So, but
well, I hope you
it was
enjoyed it while
fun
it
while it
lasted.
lasted. Yeah.
Yeah. So the setup for this episode is, I've done a couple of therapy sessions here where I'm just like having an existential crisis, or I'm concerned about something, or just trying to think out loud a little bit, and I need a sounding board. And you've been that sounding board for me and my therapist, and I've appreciated it. Those have been some well received episodes too. When we
Yeah.
sort of looked at the RFPs, we looked at is everything changing, we looked at the website being dead, and even had some spin off episodes from people reaching out and wanting to comment on those conversations. So no pressure, man. But whatever you bring today has to be of that caliber for our audience. We owe it to them because they have the real power. They could stop listening at any point. But
Totally fair.
before we get into the topic and you actually relieve me of I'm really stressed. I'll be honest. I don't like surprises. Don't like secrets. Don't like not being prepared. So I have a lot of anxiety coming into this. But you know what will relieve my anxiety?
Do I
Actually, it
ever?
probably won't. This one will actually ratchet it up a little bit, but it's that time, Adam. It's time for Stu's News.
Let's do this. Let me make sure I don't want the volume too loud for everybody, and I don't want to make it too long, but here we go.
Warp anew indeed. So
Warp anew.
this is I think you and I traded text this week, and you said, I forget how you exactly said it. You said this changes everything for travel. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And I said, no, this changes everything for everything because I really think it does. So I don't know if you've seen this or not, but OpenAI just released their first connectivity to shopping within the platform. So now they have an API that you can connect to. Shopify is already connected. Others are already connecting. So Etsy is another one. So up until now, if you've been looking for products, typically what's happened is OpenAI, ChatGPT would manifest the products, but then you'd have to click out and go to the third party store to book, right? Or to order the product. Now you can do it right within the chat window, and it can use your credit card that's on file with your that you're paying for your OpenAI account, or you can add a new profile, a new credit card to pay for. But we now have transactions live within the chat GPT interface. And we've talked before on the show how what we see today is this sort of text back and forth prompt, or even a chat, a conversation, an audible conversation back and forth is not the future of the interface, right? I mean, really, anyone that's watched Star Trek: The Next Generation, that's where we're heading at some point, right? Where it's just you're having a conversation with an omnipotent AI that's always connected to you, always knowing, and can literally do everything for you, whether that be in Star Trek's case, using the replicators and creating things from nothing, which I think with 3D printing, we're really close to being able to do a lot of that. But also now transacting. You can buy anything with your words, with your fingers to type without having to leave. And it doesn't seem, I think, like a big deal to a lot of people. Like I'm surprised people aren't making a bigger deal out of this. But to me, this changes everything because this is what we knew was inevitable. It may have
Hmm.
happened a little quicker than I thought. But people think about where this leads to, right? OpenAI, Gemini, all these sort of ecosystems are going to own the entire value chain for everything at some point, which is going to exacerbate the concerns we've expressed around what's the relevance of your website? What is the role of a DMO? And think about what this means for travel. It's a little more complicated for travel because the transaction's a little more complicated because typically a hotel especially is, hey, I'm paying a deposit now. I'm not paying the rest until I actually arrive or maybe a day before. That creates some real problems with transactions on credit cards because you got to get permission for both. And that's been one of the limitations of booking engines in terms of adopting being AI available. But I think ultimately what we're going to be doing is think about how Magic Band works at Disney, right? It's a frictionless transaction for everything I do in Disney. I can get on a ride, I can buy my meal or prepay for my meal. Your AI agents and chatbots are going to become that for life, where everything you do starts and ends with the AI of choice, whatever ends up being the dominant one or your thing of choice. It's not just transactions, it's everything. And it's not just online transactions. We're not long from going into a restaurant and the AI knowing we're at a restaurant. And at the end of the meal, the AI automatically says, are you ready to leave? Or you say, hey, I'm ready to leave. Go ahead and pay the bill. And it just pays the bill, right? And it predetermines things like tip and stuff like that. This is a big deal, man. I think this is the tip of the spear that changes everything. So
Yeah,
react,
Stuart,
please.
you and I were live on stage at Esto arguing whether or not destination websites are going to be relevant.
Mhm.
And we had a lot of fun with that. It was a hypothetical. And, we talked about, well, okay, if AI ends up being able to do this, how will it affect the websites? And it was a really fun conversation. And I think that conversation just went from fun to as relevant as anything we've ever discussed on
Mhm.
our show. I want to address a couple of the things that you said as you were describing it. Number one, when you said this changes everything about everything, not just travel, I agree with that 100%. But you talked about the possible limitations for travel. I disagree with you. I think it's going to be just as bad for travel as it is. I shouldn't say bad. Like I think it'll be really good for the consumer for
It's
travel.
disruptive, right? Not
It's
necessarily a bad outcome. It's great for the
but
consumer.
disruptive for DMOs
Yeah.
specifically because you mentioned, yeah, there might be some issues with stringing together multiple parts of a trip purchase, right? Or there might be an issue with the credit card approval and stuff like that. All those limitations that have existed with previous functionality, they've all been limited by code and the ability to code certain things in lots of cases. I don't necessarily believe that the limitations we've experienced in the past are going to be limitations in the future because of what AI is going to be able to do. If we're already able to transact within the ChatGPT platform, I think the limitations are going to go away very, very quickly. The other thing is, did you see the Walmart partnership with OpenAI?
Mhm. Yeah.
So Walmart is fascinating because, and I was listening to a podcast talking a little bit about the economics of Walmart that I don't know how much you've ordered from Walmart compared to Amazon, but in aggregate, Walmart has actually achieved being a little bit faster than Amazon with deliveries. And the
Mhm.
reason is that Amazon has 1,400 distribution warehouses across the country, or maybe around the world. I'm not sure if it was US or not, but Walmart has 4,600 stores. And so
Mhm.
basically every store has now become a distribution center.
Right.
And so the innovation that Walmart has experienced is really fascinating to me. But then to have the ability to transact in ChatGPT, the question was, well, I mean, is this are they going to get preference on the results? And ChatGPT came out and said, no, they're not going to get preference on the results. Well, I'm sorry, but economic incentives have
Yeah, not
never
today.
proven to be wrong.
Not
Yeah,
today.
not today. But that's going to happen. So now that's another layer to this disruption as well, is that economic incentives are going to be that you are required to have your product listed in the chat
Hmm.
gpt interface so that people can transact and purchase with you there. It's going to bring a level of disruption to our specific industry that we have never seen before since DMOs were created, and
Yeah.
not by a little, by a lot. And I'm really fascinated to see where this goes.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about our ecosystem is there's a lot of sort of intermediaries and middlemen. And I think initially a lot of those will be the beneficiaries of this because who's going to be faster to the game? It's going to be the OTAs, right? They're going to be far, it's going to be easier for OpenAI to connect to all the
Uh-huh.
hotels through through the OTAs. But I think long term, OTAs may become irrelevant because over time, as it becomes easier for each PMS or each individual hotel or each chain of hotels to connect, they're not going to need the OTAs because the OTAs provided a function and they do provide a function
Well,
today, which
ChatGPT
is
is the new OTA, basically.
right. It becomes it, right? Because what is an OTA's purpose? It's to help a hotel find a guest that they can't reach on their own, right? They've created a marketplace where they have customers looking for the product, right? Well, what happens when OpenAI or Gemini is the marketplace where everyone's starting their search? OTAs become irrelevant. Right now, they're necessary because it's speed to volume is there
They're the
for through,
bridge.
right? Yeah. But over time, they get disintermediated. Potentially, that would be the threat. I mean, I'm sure they're doing things to sort of protect that, but I mean, it's going to disrupt the entire ecosystem. I still do think we might have to look at how we handle hotel transactions because if you're prepaying upfront for your stay without a cancellation policy, that's more akin to like e-commerce, right? Where you're buying a product, you can't cancel it. You can maybe return it, right? Which would get done probably through a different mechanism initially and eventually seamlessly. But the fact that the transaction is right now a lot of times broken up into deposit and then the actual balance is a problem for because of the rules of the credit cards. And
Yeah.
so I think that's been what's held back a lot of independent hotels booking engines for a long time is that little weird mechanic. But I don't know. We could probably do 10 episodes just on this and what it means. But I think we've got to start imagining a world where everything is frictionless. Like
Yeah.
that's why I use the magic band analogy. If there's no step from A to B to C to get to your eventual outcome, you just have A and your eventual outcome. What is our role in that? What is
Well,
the
who's going to be the
DMO's role in that?
first DMO to pioneer getting all their stakeholders listed through ChatGPT's API, right? Like, I
Right.
think that's going to be I would love if somebody wants to pioneer that and then come tell us about that experience and what the impact is on their destination. That
Yeah.
would be an incredible episode for us to do. But somebody is going to do that and get a massive amount of earned media value and coverage by being first, similar to what you guys did with Matari Best when ChatGPT first came out.
Right. I really do think we've got to start thinking more about how do we provide um, value to our, whether we have members or not, our stakeholders, how do we provide value to our stakeholders in other forms that benefits the destination, right? So how do we, through education, through being a resource, through maybe even um, buying the relationship directly with OpenAI and then open it up to these guys. Like how do we do things similar to what the OTAs have done, right? The OTAs provide value that no one else can do individually. They can reach a guest that individuals don't have the means to reach. So how do we provide that sort of invaluable role to our membership or to our stakeholders so that not just they are at the front of the line, but more importantly, our destination is the front of the line in this new era. So yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I literally have posed a question to our team. It's like, what would it look like if that Disney Magic Band experience existed in an entire destination, you know? How
Yeah.
could we get to that point? I would have said a year or two ago that that was impossible. Now I'd say it's improbable, but I think the technology, the way it's going, 2, 3 years from now, I think it's going to be very likely that we can get to that point
Yeah.
because we're going to have
Have,
agents and agents talking to agents. And there's a few DMOs right now really obsessed with MCP and how to connect their information between different AI agents and stuff like that. I don't know if I buy that as the way forward because I think we're going to sort of leapfrog the need for MCP at some point. I think the AI is going to become intelligent enough to be able to consume the information in a non-standardized way. But I do think the thought process of how can MCP help me connect my stuff to other people's stuff, I think we probably need to do a whole
yeah.
episode on MCP. What is that? It's Model Context Protocol. It's basically the protocol that people are using to communicate between different AI systems. Um, so yeah, this is
Well,
this is a big deal.
I know we want to do a whole episode on this, so I'm not going to make the entire episode today about it. But I will say, have I shared with you my story about when I was in college and we did a project for Microsoft Zune?
You have, but I don't think you shared with the audience.
Okay. So when I was in college, Microsoft Zune came to the BYU advertising program and they said that they wanted us to help them reimagine this entertainment device. And the Microsoft Zune, which you haven't heard of it because it didn't make it, okay? But the Microsoft Zune was basically the competitor to Apple's iPod. And it was a music device. And they said to us, we want more than just music in this device. We want it to be an all-encompassing entertainment device. And as we brainstormed and everything, I look back, our minds literally could not comprehend what this could become. And we all, went through these brainstorming sessions and we thought about what it could be. And it was like these small incremental innovations for the Microsoft Zune, nothing groundbreaking. And then a year later, Apple comes out with the iPhone and the iPhone has streaming. The iPhone has, it's all your entertainment, your phone, everything, all in one. Those that were not around for that innovation don't realize how groundbreaking that innovation was. And I love that experience because it told me that my mind literally could not comprehend what was possible. And I think we're at another moment like that where more of us in the industry are going to need to start recognizing the limitations that our brain has put on what is possible because of the box we've been living in, as opposed to truly being able to remove those limitations and see what's possible in order for us to move forward. And so I think we're all still kind of in the Microsoft Zune mindset. And I think we need to look at be prepared for the iPhone to come around.
Yeah. I mean, basically what you're telling us is we've got to imagine the unimaginable, right? It's
Yes.
almost like an impossible task, but you've got to suspend your belief and disbelief to be able to think about that. Because at one point, and I understand why you would have been like that. That would have been around what, 2006 or so when the Zoom came out.
Yeah.
Um, like telephone, music, any kind of video consumption was all separate. Taking photos, these are all completely separate functions, right? The concept of a Swiss Army knife device that could do all of those things. Social media was barely in its infancy at that point, but that was all happening on a desktop. Just to be able to imagine what if all of this was in one magic box.
But
It's
Apple won because they asked that question and didn't talk themselves out of it. And I think that's where
mhm.
destinations are, is the question, what if, may be the most valuable question right now that destinations can
Hmm.
ask.
Yeah, I think it's what if and why not. I think those are the two, right?
Yeah.
It's you got to imagine what the future might look like, and then you got to say, why not us? Why not try it? What's the worst that happens? Well, worst that happens is we sit still and do nothing,
You're
and
the
everything
Microsoft
around
Zune.
us changes. And yeah, with the Zune story. But what if we go and innovate and do something we've never done before, and imagine the unimaginable, and we become the iPhone? So Yeah, it's wild, man. It's a bit of a existential crisis, but I kind of like it. It stretches my noggin in a good way.
Yeah.
All right, so let's have it. Let's. There's no way to segue here, man. I hit me with your best shot. Tell me what you want to talk about. This
Yeah. So
terrifies.
this is actually a really the Stu's News couldn't have been a better segue into this, honestly. And for the audience, Stuart, for our Desties, Stuart chose the Stu's News, and so it's kind of fascinating how it shoehorns in. We talked several months ago now, when you kind of needed a session, right, where you could just talk
Hmm.
about what's going on. And what's floating around in your head, and we talked about a little bit of an existential crisis for DMOs, and I think some of the things that you were thinking and talking about were proven to be right. Some of them I think we've talked ourselves out of a little bit over the last several months, and that's why these conversations are so relevant. Today's conversation is, I mean, for me, it's a little bit of a vulnerable discussion for me to have, and it's something that I hope that everybody that's listening can kind of recognize that I'm in the same position that a lot of other organizations are, and that's that we at Brand Revolt and the other organizations that I'm involved with, we are trying to make sure that we're relevant not for the next 12 to 18 months, but that we're relevant for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And just like DMOs are in the middle of an existential crisis, agencies are too. And I would say vendors in general, in the destination marketing space and beyond, that we're in a time where every organization needs to reimagine not only their value proposition, but how they deliver it. And so I want to just walk through a little bit of the challenges that we're facing, and then of course I want to talk about the solution and where we need to go. And to be honest with you, Stuart, I need a lot of your insight, and I would be really fascinated in our Desti's insight on this, because if I had all the answers, I would have implemented them already, right?
Hmm.
And so I'm I'm looking at a few different factors. I think number one, advertising agencies in general, historically, in the way their relationships have been set up with destinations or other clients, is you'll take on a load of work. Maybe it's a major initiative or a campaign, and you'll come up with the idea, and then you'll follow that idea all the way through to execution. And in most cases, the agency will kind of be the boots on the ground tactician to execute that campaign. And there's strategy mixed in for sure. So as we're coming up with the ideas, strategy is mixed in there. As we're deciding where to distribute the message, strategy is mixed in there. But the business model has actually been structured historically around the execution of the tactics. And what that's resulted in is, in the structure of an agency client relationship, you have the structure built around a tactical budget, and you don't necessarily have a line item for strategy. Now, what's interesting is I think you've recognized this, because you have a strategy retainer that you pay with each of the agencies that you work with, including ours. The Myrtle Beach engagement is actually the exception, not the rule for this. 99% of our engagements are structured more around the holistic budget and how it all intertwines and works together. And so the incentives, the financial incentives, actually lead in that agency relationship for the value to be placed on tactics. And we're entering an era with AI where a lot of the tactical execution is being disrupted, to the point where I don't necessarily believe that in 2 years, agencies are going to be placing digital buys. I believe that agents are going to be placing a lot of those digital buys. And even though there may be some stragglers and that it may not happen as quick as I'm saying, maybe I'm off by a couple of years, but it's going to happen, right? So number one is we've got this massive AI disruption. We've got, in the destination marketing space and others, budgets are starting to decrease. I mean, I think everybody across the board at this point is feeling that we're not going to match that 2021 performance, where we had the ARPA funds in the ecosystem, and that travelers were traveling. There was a revenge travel and all that kind of stuff. and we're seeing a little bit of a regression to the mean, and that's resulting in budgets being decreased. So in a time when tactics are about to be eliminated, budgets are decreasing, and then destinations are asking agencies for strategy and innovation, even though we've lightened the budget and eliminated several of the line items, or are going to eliminate several of the line items that would have paid for that strategy, that dedication of time, effort, and energy for strategy. I'm in the process of trying to figure out how to reimagine the agency model so that we can truly provide value in the form of strategy for our clients and not have it be so married to the tactical execution. And at the same time, I think most people who are the decision makers in the destination marketing space are still writing RFPs, structuring RFPs, and structuring client relationships around tactical execution. And to sum it up, I've got to figure out not only how to add value for how we think instead of what we do, I also have to figure out how to help clients understand that the value is in how we think, not in what we do. And it's a real uphill battle for me. So my therapy session right now, like what I'm struggling with more than anything else, is I'm in the adapt or die phase of the process, and I've got a big hill to climb, just like DMOs are facing with what we talked about with Chat GPT and everything. I actually think it's probably something that doesn't get discussed very often because we all try to look as perfect as we can and as successful as we
Mhm.
can in the space. But the destinations and vendors are all facing the exact same existential crisis.
Yeah, I mean, we're codependent, right? It's a symbiosis. We can't be successful without the services that you guys provide. You guys don't exist if we don't exist, right? So there's we're in this together, whether we like it or not. I think if I step back a little bit, and I've gone through a journey in my four and a half years in this industry, and I've clashed with a lot of our agencies over the time. I mean, I think most of them have gotten to a point where they appreciate what we're trying to do, right? But early on, I'd say the first 2 years, I was probably disliked by a lot of folks, right, that worked with us because our demands were pretty high. Our expectations were high, and we were asking people to do stuff that was outside of their comfort zone. Where some of that friction came from is I think it's a legacy, right? So I think historically, there are a lot of people in this industry, especially let's think through all the disruption we've gone through in the last 20 or so years, right? Let's say 30 years, right? Internet, right? Then we had search engines and we had email and we had social and we had mobile, you know, it there's a lot of reinvention that's happened, right? So it's not like we haven't faced reinvention in the past. And DMOs historically, we've talked about this ad nauseum, resist change. They don't like risk, and they've tried to get along. I mean, I still know DMOs that rely so heavily on print; it's ridiculous, right? So it's not. But there hasn't been the accountability and the scrutiny, right? That's different this time. Like I think there has been in the past, and people have been um, defunded in the past. It feels different this time. Like I felt like because of the federal pressure, because of things like Doge, it just feels different a little bit. And there's also an access to information and a desire for accountability and scrutiny that never existed before. We got a million eyes watching us, that whereas before we maybe had 1,000. So the pressures are different, the expectations are different. Back in the day, 4.5 years ago when I started, I feel like a lot of the agencies felt, and this is probably not a fit. I'm thinking out loud as I sort of go through this. This may not be a fair assumption, but it was my perception, right?
It was your
So
bias at the time, right?
right. So some of these folks, it felt like there was like a superiority complex to the agency side. Like they felt like the little old DMO that was paying us all the money didn't really know a lot, and that the agency knew everything. They were the wise ones, and so when they came up with a plan that we didn't want to execute, then we were dumb. Or when they came up with a plan, they were the ones that should always execute every element of that because we couldn't do it on our own, right? We weren't capable of doing it. And I think that knowledge gap and that skill gap between the agency and the DMO has shrunk to zero in a lot of cases. There's some really sophisticated talent in this industry
Yeah.
that on the DMO side that are as smart as anyone on the agency side, right? I don't think that's always been the case, right? I think the ability to know to a degree, to a depth and a degree how specific things work um, has shifted, right? Because we have access to all the information. It used to be if you want to be an expert marketer, you had to go to school for marketing. You had to do all this like experience. But now you can sort of self-train and become a very proficient marketer and surround yourself with smart people that sort of help guide you and mentor you along the way. You can become as good as anyone. So I think we've got to sort of shift, and I would say all of our partners have done a really good job of this with us, yourselves included. But we treat you guys more like partners and equals in an extension of our team, not as a vendor, not as a client vendor relationship, right? It's more, hey, we've got skill sets internally and we've got skill sets externally, and when that's why we like to be part of the ideation, right? Like the old paradigm was the DMO would say, hey, we need to solve this problem. The agency would come back with a slick deck saying A to Z how we're going to solve the problem, and here's how much it's going to cost. And that's not how we operate here, right? We say, hey, let's start talking about what the problem is and to ideating a solution. And sometimes one of our agencies will come up with a solution and we'll actually have a different agency than them
Yeah.
execute it, right? We've done that with you a few times. We've done it with other people, which created some friction at the time. But I think we've got to start thinking about the team as team vacation or visit Myrtle Beach or team whoever you are, regardless of what hat you wear, whether you're wearing a Brand Revolt hat or a Miles hat or an MMGY hat or a Lucky hat or Fulgrin hat. You know, these are all the agencies we work with.
Now you got to name them all.
Well, and I've missed some, like or an RSM hat or crossover hat or RBI hat. We work with like 9 agencies. Um, but we tell everyone every day when they come in, you've got to wear your Visit Mono Beach hat if you're on our team, and you got to leave your ego at the door. Like if it's your idea, great. But just like the same as if I have an idea in front of our team, I might not be the one that executes it, right? Probably won't 9 out of 10 in my role. So we've got to put ego aside, but we've also got to start looking at what can the DMO not do that the vendors can do. Like one of those things is you can scale solutions like we can't. Like I'm solving the problem for Mona Beach, you're solving the problem for all destinations. So I'll give you a little bit of a shameless plug. I've seen you pushing this concept of the reimagined website, right, on LinkedIn and on your podcast. Um, that's something that a DMO individually would really struggle to do. I mean, they could be a part of it, but they're not going to get all the way. But an agency can say, we're going to commit a lot of resources to this, some R&D resources. We're going to work with 4 or 5 DMOs to try to move the goalpost, move the needle, whatever you want to call it. But we can move the industry forward in an innovative, disruptive way that meets the current demands, and then you can make money on the backside by selling that same thing to 20 or 30 people, right? That's how the simple views of the world have gotten to where they are, right? So I think that's something that provides value. Now, that
Yeah.
even that becomes more of a challenge though, because now people can create their own CRM with a little bit of vibe coding. So you got to figure out what value can you provide that the DMO can't, you know?
Well,
And I
and
think
I
best
think
in breed product that can scale is probably one of those areas.
I think that's where I'm fascinated to hear your perspective on a couple of things. So I've got a couple of questions for you. I mean,
Sure.
number one, you work with 9 agencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And each one has a different skill set. I do feel like a lot of the tactical execution, whether it's public relations or whether it's digital ad buying, whether it's organic social posting, they're all things that with Myrtle Beach's budget, just from a practical perspective, it's likely you could hire a lot of those positions in-house to execute without
Mm-hmm.
leveraging an agency. And I know there's things that you probably couldn't, but I'm just saying for the most part, you
Yeah.
use you use agencies even though you probably could execute on some of those things in-house through hiring in-house. So what value do you get from agencies that makes it worth it to not hire in-house? So that vendors on the other side can hear that and understand how to offer that value prop to their clients.
The biggest value that having agent, well, let me back up. We have restrictions on our funding that prohibit us from using certain larger fund pools on salaries, right? We currently we
Sure.
don't do that. And so I think if I candidly had a magic wand, I would bring a lot of the tactical execution in-house. Like I would want to sort of control that and verticalize that because there's some redundancy. When you're using 9 agencies, I mean, just off the top, you've probably got 9 account managers, right? That you have to keep in sync. Like there's some inefficiencies in that. I
Yeah.
definitely would not recommend anyone have 9 agencies. It works for us, but there's unintended consequences to that. So, we would probably shift heavier, but I would always still use agencies. Even if I could bring everything in-house, I would still use agencies. And the biggest reason is we only know what we know, and we are only exposed to what we're exposed to. By leaning into someone that is also exposed to a dozen or 100 or 500 other destinations, and has like if I think of like a entire ability as a neural network of all the individuals and all their skill sets, you bring new stuff to me that is valuable. The biggest single value that a third party brings to us is ideation, like bringing new ideas to us, creative solutions to us that don't exist today. That's where you guys bring value, is the ideas that we don't have internally, and having some time set aside to come up with those ideas. That's
I
where the
think
value.
that's one of the places where I want to ask the question then, because you said that the most value you get from a third party is ideation, right? How do destinations and agencies structure a relationship where the financial incentives lead to ideation and innovation and aren't just structured around tactical execution? And this is, again, this is totally like selfish for me, right? Like focus group
Mm-hmm.
of one, but everybody gets to listen to it. it
Mm-hmm.
it's really the thing that I'm trying to solve for, because even if you look at an RFP that goes out, and
Mm-hmm.
there's actually, I'm seeing more active RFPs now than I ever have, which to me says I think there's a lot of destinations looking for a change or looking for disruption to what they've been doing. The problem is those RFPs are written exactly like they were before. So you're asking for the
Mm-hmm.
same solution repackaged a little differently, right? It's the Zune uh,
Mm-hmm.
exercise again. And so, how do you structure a relationship to where if what you value is ideas more than anything else, that you're paying for that instead of hiding the ideation portion in a digital ad buying budget or something like that?
Yeah. Well, so it's tough, right? It's tough to pay directly for something that's intangible, right?
The ideas that
And
haven't been come up with yet, right?
right, right. It's sort of a strategy of hope. Um, but I think what you can do is sort of, and it's we should acknowledge, right? There is a misalignment of incentives, right? You're incentivized to make as much money from me as possible. I'm incentivized to pay as little as I possibly
Hmm.
can to get the outcome we want, right? So I think, okay, first we have to agree on what the outcome is we want, right? And so what is this arrangement's purpose, right? And if the arrangement's purpose is to ultimately make sure we're successful, and part of that is making sure we've got innovative new ideas that we can demonstrably measure and say are successful. Like let's try to be specific. So
Yeah,
let's say I hire the Brand Revolt, not the Brand Revolt. If I hire Brand Revolt
you
to
did it.
help improve my social, right? And we have a goal of increasing engagement or the measurable foot heads in beds or foot visitation to Myrtle Beach through our social channels over the next 12 months. We want to move the needle 15%, right? I think we could agree that's a goal that we can
Hmm.
say is potentially something we can reach for. Now, we back up and say, well, how do we do that? Well, we got to create content, right? That engages people, that interests people, that educates people, entertains people. Okay, in order to create that, rather than me saying, hey, I'm going to pay you to produce 50 videos this year, right? And here's how much I'll pay you for that. I think we need to step back and say, well, what's all the things that need to go into that? And some of that is having time on the agenda for collaboration, having time on the agenda for brainstorming, having time on our calendars for vetting, developing processes. For there's a lot of little things in there that don't get spelled out a lot of times in the conversation with the RFP, right? It's a lot of it is, hey, we're going to create the the videos, the 10 videos. Like that's what you're paying us for. But it's like, well, anyone can create 10 videos. I can go do that with Sora 2 now for free.
Yeah.
And it would be decent. But is it being done with a purpose, with intent, with a potential success? So I think, it's how do you get to that end point? I'll give you a great example that just popped in my head as we're going through an RFP process right now. We have a foundation organization called Partnership Grand Strand. Grand Strand is the area that Myrtle Beach resides in. And we're in the process of developing our new community-wide strategy. And it's not just about destination marketing. It's everything from
Yeah.
transportation and education and all of the economy, everything, right? And so we're talking to a lot of different potential firms to do that right now. We spoke with 5 in the last 2 weeks. And I've asked a similar question to all of them. What is your process? Right? 4 of the 5 said, well, there's 3 phases. First phase is we come into market and we interview a lot of people and we get all the information and we figure out what your destination needs. Then phase 2 is we turn all that, we synthesize all that information, we boil it down into a strategic plan. And then phase 3 is we begin to implement that plan, right? They've all said the same thing. And to me, it's like, okay, but yes, I mean, I would assume that, but what is your secret sauce? What differentiates you? What's your process that makes you unique from these other people, right? And one firm, one of the people, I'm not going to mention the name, so one of them approached it from a completely different angle, and they said they said that stuff. They're like, oh, we're going to do those things, but here's where we're a little different. We know there's so much uncertainty in the world right now. We know that 5, 10, 30 years down the line, the world's going to look very different. So part of our process is we sit down with you and we talk about what that means for your destination. And we're going to say, what is the best case, worst case, and most likely case scenario for the economics of your destination, for travel in general? Right? We're going to look at macro trends of travel and where they're heading to. We're going to look at micro trends in your market, like your product, and we're going to see where it's heading to. And then we're going to look at the strategy that we're developing through each of those 3 lenses: best case, worst case, and likely case. And we're going to figure out what can we do that bends the curve in any one of those situations. So if the bottom falls out of travel, what do we do now? And then we start to look at, okay, in all 3 of these cases, what are the similarities? What do we do regardless? And then what are the warning signals we look for to determine where we bend the curve, right? To me, like, it's not my decision. We got to go through an RFP process and we got to get a
Yeah.
committee and all that. I would have given them the job on the spot.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
How did their structure of pricing what they were going to do differ from the others?
It was the same price because they all came in at flat rate, right? They're all essentially doing the same. They may have been a little more than some, a little less than some, but what they did do is they gave us a menu of additional things that they can do based on depending on what the outcome is, right?
So
So they
the
could
one that
potentially
go
make
ahead.
more money in the long time, in the long term. But we're going to get essentially the same thing we're going to get from other people. Plus, it's going to be more robust and more thoughtful. Yeah, well, actually, one of them didn't even talk about the implementation phase at all, which really concerned me. But yeah, I think you got to provide value that I can't provide on my own. And what they can bring to the table is, if they're futurists, so I don't love that name particularly, but if they're people that are paying attention at a deeper level, but also a macro level of what's changing and how we can better prepare for that. I don't need a website, right? I need a digital place where I can send people from a digital media so that they can learn as much as possible about Myrtle Beach to make a decision to come and visit Myrtle Beach. I don't need a website. I need a place where people can make the decision they want to come to Myrtle Beach, right? So that's the
Yep.
difference.
Yep. And so, I mean, even in that scenario that you just demonstrated, the one that demonstrated a willingness to think differently was the one that
Mm-hmm.
stood out to you, right? So I guess we've got 8 minutes left, and this therapy session for me could go for hours, right? Because this
Mm-hmm.
this is what I'm trying to kind of navigate on in my organization. I'm curious, as a destination marketer on the DMO side, for the Desties now that have been listening to this therapy session for the last little while, what do you think our Desties should take away from this discussion?
Well, I think as we've said in just about every episode since we started the show, the future is different than the past, right? We know that disruption is happening. We it's fully possible we're exaggerating the disruption that's happening, right? But even if we go through the exercise I was just talking about, even if we say what's the least likely to happen or the best case, worst case, and the most likely to happen, some form of disruption is coming. I mean, we can pay for stuff on ChatGPT now, right? That wasn't something
Yeah.
that existed a week ago, right, or 2 weeks ago. So um, disruption is happening. I'm seeing it in market in experiences. I'm seeing how people consume travel is different. Like we've got a restaurant here in Myrtle Beach called NHOP. It's National House of Pancakes, not to be confused with International House of Pancakes. But they're charging like $30 for a stack of pancakes, like crazy prices, like 5 times what other places are charging. But there's a line out the door. And every day, I was talking to an Uber driver today. Every day, there are people that are dropped off at National House of Pancakes, go in, see the prices, and then call the Uber to come pick them up to take them to a cheaper pancake house. Every day, there's people that do that. But they're still crushing it because for every one of those, there's 10 that want to go in and get their Instagram story of them eating there because it's a status thing, right? They've created an experience that people want to be a part of, that they want to be a part of it's their tattoo when they go on vacation, right? It's the thing that they want to share with people. Um, I've talked to medieval times here. You know, there's medieval times all over the nation. And
Yeah.
medieval times had a pretty good year this year. But they said, you know what? Alcohol sales are down. But guess what? The sales of people getting their children knighted and having photo or video of that experience through the roof, right? So what consumers are changing, right? We know that. We also know that the media landscape, how people are consuming information and how we reach consumers is changing, right? And we might be wrong in how fast that's changing or where it
Yeah.
ends up, but everything is changing. So we cannot continue what we all need to take, whether you're a DMO, whether you're a vendor, what we cannot continue to do is the same thing we've been doing. We have to look
Yeah.
for what's our edge, what's our competitive advantage. We have to get scrappy. I I I believe scrappy always wins. Scrappy always wins every time when there's disruption. And now's the time to get super scrappy. And it's not DMOs over here getting scrappy and vendors over here getting scrappy. It's us collaborating, finding trust in partners and partnerships and individuals and say, how do we solve these problems together? We got to get scrappy. Scrappy always wins.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important for everybody to know that in this fight for relevance that destination marketers are in the thick of, vendors are going through the exact same
Oh
thing,
yeah.
and we're all trying to find it together. And I don't know. This has just been helpful for. I don't even know if there's a. That's why I was asking you for a valuable takeaway, because I don't know how to wrap this up and say, okay, everybody, here's what you take away from this. But we're
Mm-hmm.
all in this together, I guess, is the
Yeah,
takeaway for
we
me.
need radical collaboration in our industry right now. On the vendor side and the agency side, we got to put down our arms. Any kind of clashes of, territorialism or defending. If we try to fight this individually, we're all going to lose, right? Every one of us. So we got to fight it together. Like if I were you, Adam, if I was a vendor on DMO side, I'd be looking at who are the other DMO, who are the other DMO vendors in the space that I can form coalitions with. Like how can I create more vertical, complete solutions for DMOs? Because we're going to have to get entrenched here over the next 5 years. And I don't want to be switching vendor left and right. And I don't want my vendors to be saying, well, I don't really work with those guys, but we'll figure it out, right? I need a unilateral aligned team that knows what we're doing, works well together, isn't just in it to try to make money from me, but wants to be successful. If we can do that, I think we'll be okay.
I love it.
Hmm.
I love it. Thank you for this.
Was it helpful?
Very, very helpful. And just helpful also to hear like that, like that example of the city planning stuff that you're doing and the
Hmm.
vendors that came in, hearing what the differentiator was, even
Hmm.
that is incredibly helpful to me. So I
Yeah.
sincerely I appreciate it.
Well, the other thing I would say about that, we had a, it's really funny how things sort of line up, or maybe you just look for patterns. I don't know, but we had a team meeting today, like an all-staff meeting, and our new CEO, Matt Pavanik, was talking about our core values and wanting to reevaluate the core values of the team. And when you look at our core values, it's things like integrity, transparency, right? And people would look at that at a surface level and say, well, those are great. Those should be your core values.
Yeah.
His point was different. He was like, guys, this is table stakes. Like, that shouldn't be our core values because the assumption is we're already doing that stuff. Like that's just so it's like in the RFP case, it's like, yeah, you're gonna do research, you're gonna create a strategy, you're gonna implement a strategy. Of course we're gonna do that. You have to acknowledge it. Of course we're gonna have integrity. Of course we're gonna have transparency. Um, but what differentiates us, right? And here's the thing, Tim Peter, who's been on the show, has said this to me many a times. He said, differentiation in business is about, it's not about being different. It's about doing something different that people are willing to pay for, right? To having value that people are willing to pay for. That's what
That's really
differentiation
good.
is, you know? So whether you're a business or a hotel or you're the National House of Pancakes and you're charging $30, you gotta, their differentiation isn't that they're charging $30 for a stack of pancakes, right? The differentiation is that you have an experience that you can't get anywhere else. And more importantly, it helps your ego, it helps your status, it helps you put content on your social media feed, which people really value today, right? And
Yeah.
if I go and post the story of me sitting at the International House of Pancakes and get my $5 stack of pancakes, that doesn't give me as much value as me posting that story of me eating at the $30 pancake house, you know? So it's a new world, guys. People are different. DMOs are different. Consumers are different, and we've got to find a way to differentiate. How do we create value people are willing to pay for?
No notes. I like it.
Awesome. Well, Adam, I like it, man. We're gonna have to do more of these therapy sessions. I like it because it tests me to think on my feet. I might fully change all of my opinions 2 months from now, but right now this is where I am.
Well, I kind of like the idea of having a conversation without the mirage of everything being sunshine and
Rosie,
rainbows,
yeah.
but it's like this is what's actually going on in both of our businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
super valuable.
Awesome, man. Well, if people want to find out more about you, where can they do that?
Find me on Tourism IQ or Adam at thebrandrevolt.com.
Awesome. You can find me at stuart.butler at visitmyrtlebeach.com or on LinkedIn. Yeah, hit us up. We've had a few people reach out recently and say they wanted to be on the show. So that's been pretty fun. And yeah, please leave a review. Let us know how we're doing. If you disagree with stuff we've said today and you want to come on and do a rebuttal, we'd love to have you on the show. So until next time, this has been Destination Discourse.
Thanks, everybody.